Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Some speakers to my right. You might want to be in between them for the best sound from some of the presentation that they'll be doing later. You could always run over there while they're doing the sound and then come back to your preferred seating location if you have an emotional attachment to where you're seated. I completely understand that. I'm going to very briefly introduce our speakers today. There are three of them, and I can't remember all the amazing things that they've done, but all three of them are just incredibly accomplished artists and academics, and I'm just really excited that they're here with us today. Richard Carpin is the director of the DXARTS program at the University of Washington. Sean Brixey is the associate director, and Juan Pampin is from Argentina. He did not speak a lot at lunch, but I can't wait for him to speak today because he has such a beautiful accent, and I'm very excited to hear a lot more about his work. If you could all please help me welcome these gentlemen.
Thanks, and thanks for everybody coming. I understand it's sort of an informal group, and we like informal presentations. I'm Richard Carpin, the director of the program. We're going to be having three short presentations today by the three of us, and we're going to try to go through the things that we want to talk about and show sequentially with a little bit of time for questions in between and after each one. But to make sure we get through all our presentations, we'll save the bulk of the questions if they start to run on for afterwards. So we'll probably try to do about 12 to 13 minutes each or something like that, and then save questions for the group of us. And in fact, sometimes we like to answer the questions about each other's work sometimes anyway. I just want to briefly talk a little bit about the program. And then we'll go right into the presentations of the work as examples of what some of the faculty are doing, and of course, which will have some kind of impact on what the students are doing. The Center for Digital Arts and Experimental Media is a new program on the UW campus, but it's more than a decade in the making. I won't go through the long history of how we got there because I think I'd rather have us spend our time showing projects and talking about the artwork we do. But it's a program where the faculty and now the students are not only artists. I don't want to say not only artists as if that's not enough, because it's pretty good to be an artist, but do their art with a lot of know-how in technology and various kinds of media, sometimes science of various kinds, sometimes engineering, combinations of them. The PhD program we have is the first in the world, I'll say. There are other PhD programs in the arts. I'm a composer, and I have a doctorate, and there are doctorates in music. But there really is no program in the world that in what we could call art. The regular degree that people get as artists is Master of Fine Arts degrees. They're a couple of years long, maybe 3 years long. Sometimes there are a few PhDs around, and those PhDs usually are making some artwork and then writing some kind of rhetorical thesis or critical theoretical essay. Our PhD is a practice-oriented PhD, more modeled in a way after a science degree, where a project, a final major project that makes a major contribution to the field is what the students arrive at after 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, of study and work, and a set of documents, similar maybe to a science or engineering PhD, where the documentation is a contribution to the field so that the project can be understood, how it was made, what it means, and such. So it's really the first of its kind, and it's based on a simple premise. I don't know if any of you would ask this question, but I get asked this question a lot. Why do you need a PhD in art? Art is people expressing themselves, and to us, art is much different than just people expressing themselves. Everybody expresses themselves, so obviously that can't be what art is, because all of us are always expressing ourselves. I like to use a very simple equation when people wonder about it, an art PhD, because people in the sciences and engineering often get PhDs. And the equation is this: a physicist, let's say, will spend maybe 6 years after their bachelor's degree in graduate study, working towards a PhD, and then maybe they'll spend a couple of years as a postdoc, so maybe 6 to 8 years after the bachelor's degree before they're getting a job teaching as a professor or a job at the top of their field as postgraduate. And in the arts, it's been typically 2 or 3 years. So the simple question is, either art is easier to learn, or we're not sending out our artists into the world with the same kind of training that we're sending out our scientists and engineers and our humanities scholars. And that's the side that we believe as artists, that it's damn hard. It takes a lot of know-how and a lot of learning, and we're probably, when we send someone out with a master's degree to become a teacher, they probably don't know as much as the person who's teaching EE or CS or physics or astronomy when they start their jobs as assistant professors someplace or in some professional career that's postgraduate. Let me just give you a quick rundown about the program, and then we'll head to the subject at hand. In our PhD program will be rather small, 15 students or so. We've also got a BFA program that's brand new. Our faculty and students have won awards such as Fulbrights and NEA grants and Ars Electronica prizes. And let me just go through quickly so you can see visually. These are some of the areas that we do research and artwork in. So digital cinema, digital image processing, interactive installations, telepresence, telematic art, sensing and control systems, digital sound synthesis and processing, computer music sound art, spatial imaging, holography, mechatronic and robotic art, digital media history, algorithmic processes, computer modeling and animation. We've just recently hired a new professor to teach animation and modeling, and other areas of that are in art and technology oriented areas. So let me leave it there so we can actually go on to the presentation. We're going to try to stick to a schedule here. I can go on for the next 2 hours talking about the history of the place. I'd like to introduce Sean Brixey. Sean is the Associate Director of the program, and I'm not going to do a bio. I'm going to let him talk about himself through his work and tell you about his background himself. So, Sean Brixey, and I'll return afterwards.
Thank you. I'm trixodexophobic, so I'll either talk for 12 minutes or 14 minutes, but not 13. Let's see here. Pull this up, get you settled, give you a little bit of my background, and then we'll get going. I'm the Associate Director of DXARTS. My undergraduate degree is from the Kansas City Art Institute in Sculpture and Experimental Media, and was trained as kind of a renegade in those days. And my advanced degree is from MIT, from the Media Lab. I know that one of you, Steve, is from here. Anyone else from the Media Lab? I went early on in the days where you really were brought in, and they allowed you to kind of make art as long as you did really hardcore, good science. And they let you spend your extra time and your hours taking care of that kind of work. But in art school, I could draw and paint and do all the traditional rote processes very, very well, so it didn't consume much of my interest. And one of the ways that they selected between sculptors and painters is you would get a bag lunch, and you take your art bin box, and then they would drive you in a bus into western Kansas and drop you at 5-mile increments. The sculptors were given the problem to create a perfect moment, and the painters were given the problem to create a perfect line. Then the faculty would come back probably 10, 12 hours later, and they would critique your work, and usually you'd be eviscerated. Many kids would get kicked out of school. They'd end up in West Virginia pumping gas, that kind of thing. So the anxiety is just like coursing through your veins. But of course, I was from Missouri, which is the show me state, and I just happened to be one of those kids that was cocksure. I had no problem. This was going to be a no-brainer. So I wasted my time. I laid down. I took a nap. I got horribly sunburned on one side of my face. You know, like literally second-degree burns. Woke up delirious. I looked at my watch. Panicked. So I started digging a hole in the ground. And not to bury myself or so that they don't find me or to already go ahead and, you know, commit academic suicide, I put a aluminum pan or a bucket down in this hole, and I poured all the water that I had from my canteen in there. So if they were late, like by 2 or 3 hours, I'd be literally licking it up like a dog because I had no other water on me. I took a piece of wheat chaff about 4 inches long, split it down the middle, made a little raft. You all know where I'm headed. Lay it on top, took a long needle, darning needle that was in my bin box, and you all have big magnets in there that keep all your pins together so that when you're, you know, in crit, you can pin things up very quickly so that they don't get lost and you don't stick yourself. So I took a magnetized needle, I lay it on the raft. What happens? A compass is formed. So think about that, though. You get all of these august bodies of instructors coming back and faculty and professors. They peel out of the bus with their gray hair, and they look. And all of a sudden, they're stunned because this little 18-year-old kid has actually created a perfect line. Actually circumscribes the globe with absolute unerring perfection. However, at the same time, it creates a perfect moment, right? Because the tensor field is constantly in a state of becoming. It's not really always stable. And they they were like, oh my God, you know, how did you do this? And of course, they didn't really realize that I had had an anxiety attack, and it was just by gut instinct that I did this, because I grew up on a farm, but at the same time, my parents were TV producers. They produced the Grand Ole Opry, the really good old Grand Ole Opry, Hank Williams, Patch Klein, Red Foley. The good old days with the old-fashioned Videocon tubes with all the reciprocity around the edges. They glow black around. I love the look of that. So I grew up on the floor of a TV studio. The idea of encoding people's dreams, imaginations, their movement, their presence, their ideas, transmitting it over great distances, having it decoded instantaneously in someone's house, in their living room, in a bathroom, or even storing it on a magnetic tape, storing their agency for playback at another point in time. So as I went through art school, I got very angry because the tools that I was being taught didn't allow me to make the things that I wanted to make. I didn't want to make pictures or objects that represented the thing in my head. I wanted to make the thing itself. So to computer scientists, that's a no-brainer. That's called an emulation. But ultimately, you're trained in art school to create simulation upon simulation upon simulation. And so ultimately, I figured that the only way that I could really get my head around it and build the tools to do it was to go to a science school. And I was accepted to go to MIT. And it was a huge culture shock. I was very much at home there, and probably more at home than any place that I've ever been except for DXARTS. So my work began, and my website, I'll leave a bunch of cards out. You can go there, 15 or 20 years of work that you could look at. But I'm just going to show you a couple of pieces along the way. This one's called Instruments and Material Poetry. And this is pre-internet, 91, 92. It was commissioned for the Mitsukoshi Museum in Japan. What this is it's a 50 million candle-powered light source that emits enough radiation pressure in a vacuum that actually can create a small gravitational field of its own and impart the kinetic momentum of the photons when they strike an object. And then that kinetic momentum essentially begins to construct a little kind of artificial gravitational system for objects to move in. I encode my voice into the light, which actually increases and decreases their amplitude modulation. The gravitational field on the particles themselves, they all begin to spin and increase in mass through inertia, and they begin to form a flat oblate disk. And as each one spins, there's light that's kicked off of each one of the particles, and those are picked up by optical engines on the side that actually convert the light to electricity into sound. Now, you know the particles are spinning, each one at a different rate, right? Because you've got a central axis of rotation, you've got particles that are all moving on their own axis, and each one has to stay in position to the angular momentum of the entire little galaxy. I'll show you a picture, I promise. I'm from Missouri, which is a show-me state. I don't believe anything until I see it. But as the particles spin, they Doppler shift the poems that are encoded into the light. This is all simple. I know you're engineers, computer scientists. This is basic science. This is very easy stuff. But the construction of that, thinking about an artist actually making art at the edge of where photons and electrons interact in matter, that's really far down there. And being able to produce the system so that this is stable, it can show in museums, it's poetic, it's enduring, it's transformative for the people who see it, that's important. Two video cameras right here on a stereo microscope. Those are from the Desert Storm era. Those would be HARM missiles cameras, something like a Javelin 2 or Javelin 1. Each one of those would be projected with a moderately high-resolution data projector for those days, each one having a linear polarizer on them, non-depolarizing screen, so you actually walked into a three-dimensional shape that was being formed by my voice, which is now the new gravitational system for the small particles as they are being constructed. So we'll do one quick stop here. If you can, yeah. Actually, I'm going to go one back really quick. We'll give you a test. If you can cross your eyes, this is actually shot from slightly above. You'll see a stereo image form. And if I had a laser pointer with me, you'd actually see. I'll use my mouse.
Cross or walleye?
Huh?
Cross or walleye?
Cross will get you fine. Walleye will actually invert it. You'll get hyperscopic or pseudoscopic, depending on which direction you do. So here's the axis of rotation. This one's an unusual one. It's a binary system in which two systems form, and this one's kind of getting caught in almost like an accretion disk, the way that you would see in cosmology in deep space. Here's a motion picture of it. This was also shown on Smithsonian World Television, so it's been converted into probably 30 or 40 languages and been seen since 1987. Yeah. Oh, that'd be nice. Thank you. So what I'm going to do once this plays is I'm going to scrub this timeline, and you'll actually see the axis of rotation in the middle. Thank you. And you'll see that the particles on the outside, of course, have to maintain position. So they move incredibly fast while each one is spinning on their own axis. So this is pre-internet. This wasn't streamed to the internet. When the problems would arise, I'd actually have modified EKG, heartbeat, and respiration monitors, things like that attached to it, and modify it so I could actually determine when the pieces were ill. And then I'd have little pieces of tape faxed to me, and I'd be able to tell the technician at the museum to actually go in and assist with the work. Don't try to anthropomorphize it, just trying to give myself the tools that I need to finish the works. I'm going to watch my schedule very carefully. The next one that I'm going to show you is Alchemy. This was done for the Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan in 1998. I was invited to do ice carving. I am not an ice carver. I don't do Harleys. I don't do swans. I don't do that kind of stuff. But I knew that if they accepted me to do it, I would turn what they asked me to do on its head and get deep inside of kind of the cultural psyche and figure things out as I went. I was skiing in Vermont. It was a perfect day, 28 degrees. Snow was falling, those giant aggregate snowflakes. And I had two black gloves on, and I caught two, and I remembered the story that my grandma told me that no two snowflakes are alike. The reason that no two are alike in nature is because they're precise atomic recordings of all the histories in their lifetime. There's a logarithmic scale of junk matter in space that floats around. They use it as a nucleating surface they build off of, and then they grow. So they record not only the original nucleating surface, but the history of their lifetime. So I thought, if I could actually strip this all away, couldn't I record anything I want to? Computer data, image, photo file, even biological material. So I worked on the meteorology of snowflakes, figured that out. Ended up being just very simple things like taking ultra-pure water, the same water that you use for semiconductor construction, for biotechnology. You can drop its temperature to minus 41 degrees C. Doesn't know how to freeze. It's like a junkie looking for a fix, going through a million quasi-crystal permutations. And the minute that you provide it something that it can grow off of, and especially if the epitaxy is really high, the atomic similarity is high, bam, it'll instantly freeze. And it doesn't do so by heat dissipation. It doesn't do by any other mechanism that we're familiar with. So I took the blood and the urine samples from the athletes that they already provide, and the 17 carbon atom hexagonal arrays. These are not long-chain polypeptides, right? These are like steroids like androsterone, testosterone, estrol, those kinds of things, either metabolic through the urine or through the blood. And the atomic similarity is very, very, very strong, within 2 to 3% and minus 3 to minus 5 degrees Celsius. Bam, instantly can freeze. So essentially I was designing a kind of atomic portrait of all the athletes from all the countries. But ultimately they didn't want me to do that because they thought I'd build designer weapons and kill all the athletes. And so they asked me, can you actually create an artwork in a place that no one can ever go? I thought, oh my God, this is becoming impossible. So ergo telepresence emerged. All of you know about telepresence. This is early streaming technology or push technology, used JPEGs, but it allowed many hundreds of thousands of visitors to go there that would never have gone in person. There's a control in there for the scientists in the crowd who don't believe, that don't remain frozen. Here's some ice crystals. Here's a great set of images. These three on the top are the original ones grown from esterol. The three on the bottom are actual clones of the top ones, and if you look very carefully, you see a shape that's like California. See the same one right here. This isn't Photoshop, I promise. This is a diamond shape that you'll see here. Quantum uncertainty doesn't allow me to clone it exactly, but it's very, very close and able to produce some extraordinary events. The epitaxy, or the atomic lattice, however, is large enough to where it distorts the ice crystal structure so that through polarized light it produces extraordinary colors, just phenomenal colors, colors that you wouldn't see if you took an ice cube from your refrigerator at home. I'm going to blast through the last project really quick, and then you will be on to my colleague Juan Pampin, or excuse me, Richard Carpin. EON is two ultrasonic transducers. They emit such a high energy force field in the shape of an hourglass here that you could probably put an object in there and just blow it apart. There's liquid in there. This is essentially water that's doped with hydrogen, xenon, and glycerin. Release an electric current, a bubble gets trapped in the middle like a pair of pliers, and begin applying a force on it that basically causes the radius of the bubble to reach near relativistic speeds, and when it does so, it produces sonoluminescence. Physicists have known how to do this for 80 years, but they don't know the mechanism behind it or why. I don't either. I have some really interesting speculation about it. Some people think it's quantum vacuum radiation because the vacuum and the water interface get out of phase with one another when they travel at near relativistic speeds. There's other solutions that are out there, but no one's figured it out. Where eon does do the transformation is that anyone who can send text, email, in any Romance language, in Japanese, it's converted instantly into spoken word through a text-to-speech synthesizer, and then the text-to-speech is converted into amplitude-modulated ultrasound. There is a little process that I got an award for at at Berkeley for being able to do that, and we're able to amplitude modulate the little bubble of ultrasound, of the sonoluminescence, and by doing so, the radius increases and decreases, allowing for the star and the jar essentially to get brighter and darker, and then we use some nice photoelectronics here to convert that visible light into spoken word, literally on the fly. And able to run it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Most scientists usually do picosecond measurements. I'd love to be able to hold an endurance record for sonoluminescence for X number of years, but that's not the reason behind doing it. The question that we posed to you is about emulation, and the idea that these works may point to the end of computing as the way we know it, because ultimately this is not a simulation, this is an object, this is a real measurable thing at a distance being made by millions of people using computing and a kind of networked intelligence to construct things at a distance that are actually real. The snowflakes that are encoded with the hormones of the athletes are not pictures of those things. It's not like if we took an electron microscope and looked at the paper substrate that a picture is drawn on. It is the artist, it is the athlete, it is the author, all the way down to the atomic level. So this is one step farther in emulation, which is working towards making things that are not images or objects that represent it, but they're indistinguishable from the things themselves. So there's 15 years of history on that site. You're welcome to go in there and take a peek. We're hoping that we build a long-term relationship with you all, and that we'll be able to have you over and that we can come back, because the work itself, all of our works, would take many more hours to discuss and have fruitful arguments over. Thanks very much. Cards.
I'm going to keep mine rather short to make sure I leave enough time for Juan, and I'll be a little bit more down to earth now. And let's bring the bio. I'll get it. So Sean comes from the Show Me State, where people don't believe it until they see it. I come from New York, where they don't see it until they believe it. And I think that combination has worked well in building up our program. I'm a composer. Classically trained composer, but even as a young person, I was dealing with making things and building gadgets to do that. At lunch, I was telling your colleagues that I consider myself to be a severely trained classical composer in the amount of counterpoint that I had to do in studying, but I'm glad I did now. I'm going to talk about one area of the kind of work that I do and that we do in DXARTS having to do with sound and music. We do a lot of work that doesn't involve live performance. We study a lot of signal processing, EE, computer science, algorithmic processes to generate sound, music, sound art, and other kinds of experiences. I'm going to talk a little bit about work, just briefly, having to do with traditional musical instruments and extending them through simple, actually quite direct ways, but not necessarily simple from the programming and signal processing point of view, but simple from the point of view of the performer, in a way. As a composer who doesn't need to write for live performers, because I can do a lot of the things I need to do when I want to compose sound works purely digitally or mechanically, when I write for a performer, it's a very special thing. I consider that the kind of knowledge that performers who have been studying, let's say, a traditional musical instrument, whatever culture it is, if it's a traditional instrument that goes back hundreds of years and they know how to play it, maybe they've been, if they're real virtuosi on their instruments, they've been learning how to play for 20, 30, 40 years. In the case of this piece, this is a 65-year-old musician who's been playing since he was a teenager. So they carry with them hundreds of years of knowledge of playing that instrument. And I consider this to be a real kind of knowledge. Not just physical, athletic, how do you play, where do you put your fingers, but knowledge, and sometimes I try to compare it to, again, to a scientist's knowledge of their science is not through textual explanation of what's happening with the planets, but very often mathematical explanations, which is understood as direct knowledge. And to actually put it into language is to trivialize the knowledge that's embedded in the mathematical description, mathematical model, let's say, of how we understand that. And that's what a performer is doing when they play. They've got this model of all that knowledge living within their bodies, and when they play, you can't talk about why it is, but they do it. And so I like the idea of doing completely new things, but I also like the idea, in a way, this is like emulation, in a way, of preserving that knowledge, but building upon it. So if I were to create an entirely new instrument, and someone learned that instrument for a few years, that's not the equivalent of learning an instrument that people have played for 200 years, and have they been playing it for 20 or 30 years. I'm not saying you shouldn't build new instruments, but this is a way, what I'm after is accessing that knowledge and transforming it. So let me just briefly talk about a piece. This is actually a violin, but I'm going to talk about the version of it for viola, which is the real thing, and I'll just show you some images. He's a violinist. He actually used to work at Microsoft a long time ago, this guy. So he's just playing a normal violin. It's attached to it with a microphone, a pretty good microphone, to above the body of the violin. It's not a contact microphone because I want to gain the actual acoustic quality that's coming from the violin. And the microphone is attached, it goes into a computer, running programs in real time to signal process it and try to transform the instrument and the playing of the instrument into, in this case, a player that has an instrument with a huge range and pitch and timbre and tone quality and loudness and spatialization even. And maybe he's got several arms. Maybe he's got 5 virtual arms and lots of fingers, and a violin that now, or viola, that has many fingerboards and bodies, but still controlled. He's got a score, and he's actually playing from music. He's playing from written down music, and he knows what he's playing, and he knows when he does this or he does this, he knows what's going to happen, and so he realizes he's controlling that. So let me display you some quick samples of this. The piece is called solo tutti. If you know musical terminology, solo, everybody knows solo. Tutti is everybody. It's a form where you have the soloist, and the tutti is everybody playing together, so it's a kind of play on the idea that he's one player, but he's playing many parts. Just play the beginning of it, and then I'll just scrub through the sound a little bit and give you some sense. I'll stop here and I'll skim forward, and I'll just play another quick segment in a second. So everything you're hearing is live. This is actually a studio recording, but it's a studio recording of what we do live. So the violist in this case is a viola player. He's a great viola. He's one of the world's great viola players. So he can play a lot, but he can't play that much. And so everything that's happening is happening live from the viola. If he stops playing, the sound stops. One of the things that's going on there, besides extending the range of the instrument through the processing and extending the amount of sounds, there's also some real-time time scaling going on in there. So the program is recording everything he's playing while he's playing, and can take snapshots of where he is at some point and start to stretch it in time, or even speed up in time. But in this case, those longer sounds in the background are made from him playing, and the computer then takes a window or some part of the sound that he's playing and then just slows it down in time. And one part of the piece, the computer part, let's say the part that's being played back electronically from the computer, and he are playing sort of a tag with each other, because the viola part is written in such a way that it has some repetition, so you really can't tell what's happening and who's doing what first. And so it sounds like the computer's catching up and actually going ahead of him and going back and forth between them. Let me play you a couple of more fragments of this, just to give you a sense of the racket that you can make with one player. Excuse me. I'll just play one short under fragment there. It can also be very gentle. It doesn't have to be loud and harsh and dramatic. It can also be very, very gentle and very responsive. Here the computer is acting as a double. It's actually a duet, a solo duet. That is, it's a unison duet. They're playing, it's exactly in time with each other, but it's two different, it's as two different players are playing together, are playing the same music. So you can sort of, if you get a sense that that's what's happening there. So on to something completely, not completely different, but let me just go on to another thing really quick to get on to our next presentation. This is a work, I think I'll just show you from here. It's a work for trombone and computer. In this case, I've actually altered the trombone a little bit. We built a attachment to the slide, and I think you can see just on the top of the slide, there's two pipes on the top part of the slide there. And the top pipe has a LED at one end and has a photoresistor on a dowel that goes in and out. So as you take the slide in and out, it's actually using the photoresistor tracks the intensity of the light. Very simple. But it's a way of turning the slide into a very simple controller. It's something that the trombonist knows how to do. They spend their whole lives, and believe me, if anybody play trombone, a lot of people do play trombone in high school because it's the instrument that you get handed. I played trombone in high school. To really do this well, it's really hard. And so this is what, besides the mouthpiece thing, is what he knows how to do. So with the data coming from the slide, it goes into the computer, gets modulated, and I can use that as a signal to track where the slide is at any given time, what direction it's moving, how fast it's moving, and then use that to control anything. In this case, he's actually speaking with it, and I'll play one last sample. Actually, the piece begins with him snoring through the trombone, and the slide is controlling filters, the formant filters that sort of give a vocal quality to the snoring. But I don't think I'll play that right now. This is a concert recording, not that great, but he's actually speaking text of Richard Feynman's lectures on physics, and using the slide to read it faster, slower, sometimes just land on a consonant. There's the word space, and we like to do space. And you can sort of hold it there. Or you could actually just have the consonants by going through the like this and make it into a percussion instrument with the consonants of the speech, things like that. So there are just a couple of ideas of the kinds of things that I'm working on and some other people are working on. And as I said, I think that we'll just continue and then save all the questions for after the three of us present, and I'll turn it over to Juan Pampin. Thanks.
There? Okay. My name is Juan Pampin. I'm a composer too, and a sound artist. I'm from Argentina, and she said, and I've been working for many, many years with computers and sound. And one of the motivations to work with computers was that every time when I was composing, I had this deep interest in sound and getting more into the sound and understand more about how sound works and to have handles on sound. So for many years, I was a professional percussionist, and I was spending hours and hours exploring different sounds I can come out of one single instrument, a cymbal, a tam-tam, a drum, whatever. So with the years, I developed, I went to Stanford University. I was there in the Center of Computer Music Research, and I studied quite a lot of, I would say, double E techniques to do digital signal process applied to sound. In particular, I was interested on a particular technique that is, or a field that is called the spectral modeling. And I'll talk a little bit, instead of talking about pieces I had, I'll talk about the research I've done and then show a little bit of a piece that applies this research. So let me start. Oops, wrong one. Let me start with this one. So ATS is the name of I'll say a system I developed over the years. And so the system is a spectral modeling system. So the idea here is that you start from a sound, a normal sound, and you do an analysis, a spectral analysis of it. So you probably all know what that means, and get into the frequency domain, and then you do modeling. So the trick there is how you bring all the information you have into terms that are meaningful for a composer to use, that are not, you can get zillions of, partial data, spectral data, but not all of that data is important. And we know a lot about that, especially now working with compression. So one of my areas of research also when I was at Stanford was perceptual audio coding. And I decided how can bridge perceptual audio coding issues with composition and with sound modeling and spectral modeling. So the model I'm using in this system consists of, well, let's take a sound and see what is the important part of it in terms of perception, what is important for our ears, and see what is less important, and the part that is less important, how we can model it in a way that is easy for a musician to deal with, to work with. So in other words, if I have a sound of a clarinet, well, probably not all the information I'm gathering from it is important. Only a few important spectral traits of it are important for the composer to use, and then the rest can be modeled more statistically or more in a higher order level, or even discarded in some times. Let me show you an example so we can. So suppose that you start with a sound. Let's do the clarinet example. So that's an original sample of the clarinet. And now what we'll do is analyze it and take out what I consider important information, and then subtract that from the original. So here's what you get. Let's see. Let me play. This is the synthesized tone back, with just what I consider is important or relevant, and that's the synthesized tone back with the important information plus the statistical model of the rest, what I discarded. Let me show you what is the rest. Okay, this not only lets you model this other part that I will talk briefly about how that's done, but also gives the possibility for the composer to work with this other part of the sound, to decompose the sound into different components and operate on these different parts with different algorithms and create new sounds. So what's going on here is that when actual sound, let me just briefly show this, it will fit here probably. Yeah. So what's going on, I just go briefly through this, but is after the analysis is done, I do what I call psychoacoustic processing on the data. So I try to analyze what is important there and mark and give we can call a psychoacoustic metric of the data I have. And then using that information, I discard information that I don't consider important, and I model that part of the sound. And then I subtract that and get a residual that is what you were listening to. So it's a technique that is, this principle of the residual has been out forever, but the idea of using the psychoacoustic information to create the residual is probably what is novel. So then I take that residual and then I model it using perceptual audio coding principles. Basically what I'm doing is taking this noise part, that is what you heard, and try to map that spectrum along the critical lines of hearing and then divide that into 25 equal parts and see what is the energy on each of these bands. We know that if we can model that in 24 little bands, then we can encode that with 24 numbers only, instead of having to encode the whole spectrum. So, I'm not after compression, but that could be also used as compression, because like the clarinet you just heard, it has only 21 sinusoids and 24 critical bands. So it's, like less like 50, per frame, data frame, you have only 50 numbers that you have to encode. So let me show one more thing. So this is the way this works. So the energy on each band is evaluated, and then in the system, what is done is all that energy gets redistributed into the sinusoidal data. So that means that every single particle in the sound has also a noise component that belongs to it. So that means that then you can operate they become hybrids between sinusoidal components and noise. So that means that for the composer, there's this new entity that can be tweaked and that can be used to create new sound. Let me show you a few examples of that. So the other thing is, when you have this data, then you can start, you can create, you can have several of these models together and blend them into new models, like hybrid sounds that take some spectral traits of one sound or the other. But now you can do that using this psychoacoustic information, so that then you can map on the critical bands exactly the amount of noise or the amount of energy you have to have the impression of having this merge happen. So, and a simple example of that will be like, let me show, like doing morphing. So for instance, this is an example of morphing the noise of the blowing of the clarinet into the noise of a consonant of a spoken word. So let me just play this. Okay, so you have the word fire. So all I did was morphing the critical bands of one to the critical band energy of one to the critical band energy of the other. I could do the same with both the noise part and the sinusoidal part. So you get the idea. So you can start with one sound and with the other, or even merge sounds together. Let me play you just an example of this merging, and also a more complex transformation of one of my pieces. This was done, it was a commission to do a piece in a metal factory in Argentina. That is a particular place that was recovered by the workers, and now is half-time a metal factory, half-time a cultural center. And they give you, as artists, you get commissions from them, and the workers help you build whatever you have to build, and they give you huge spaces of the factory to do installation. So this piece was a sound piece, and it's called One that are, well, I'll stop there, but I'll just play a little bit of the piece, and it's all done using this principle of morphing. So there's sounds that mimic the sounds of the factory machines that morph into a different type of sound. So let me just do this. So the sound of the typewriter was encoded in a similar way as the sound of the other, there might be like 20 or 30 different machine-like models, and they are gradually morphing into each other. So it's done by bands, and each of the critical bands is merged into the other sound to seamlessly do this morphological transformation you hear. So I'll stop there. And then you can represent all this data. So this is a simple GUI that where you can see, that's the sinusoidal data there. That's for speech, and also you can take a look at the noise component, and the grayscale there is showing you more or less how the energy is distributed. So composers can use this tool to create the new sounds, see what the distributions of energy are, and operate on the sounds. How am I doing? Okay. I think I will stop there, so we can have some time for questions. Okay. Thank you.
So we'll hang out for as long as you guys want to hang out if there are questions. I'll just say that other areas that I know Juan is working on are areas of using ultrasound in very interesting ways for sound projection, but also for other kinds of ways of encoding things. Sean, same. We're just showing you some quick samples. Obviously, we're running through some things really quickly. If you like more information about the kinds of things that we do, we can talk about some of that now. But otherwise, aside from visiting our website, give us a call. You can find information about us on our website. I think our website's here someplace. Actually, do you have it on yours? Because
yeah.
why don't you just bring up so you can see the URL, and we'll just open it up for questions if there are any.
Who do you get approached by? Does anyone from the music industry ever approach you?
For
Try
what?
to generate like the perfect instrument or the perfect sound or the perfect commercial application any or all of your work?
We often talk to people from industry, and I wouldn't say we have a policy about it, but we're artists. And one of the things, I don't mean this to sound glib, but we're on university salaries. And one of the things, the privileges we get by being on university salaries is we don't actually have to do industry work, because I guess I figure I'd want to triple my salary or something, literally. I mean, I don't say this to be like, oh, there's no bitterness about the salaries we make. We get the freedom to not have to worry about if it makes money or not. So when we get approached by people, they'd like us to provide things, but we'd have to spend our time making it into that, which would mean we're no longer doing art. We're actually providing commercial tools for funding, and therefore we're no longer research academics and artists. We're now doing industry work, and so we're not against that, but it's a commitment of time and idea and passion that it's not where we focus our time. Now, I will tell you that the kinds of things that we've all worked on over our careers are in commercial applications. We're very much an open source kind of community, and there's a certain kind of time stretching that I didn't invent, but I certainly made some additions to it that's now all over the place and things. And I know that some of the things that Juan is working on and Sean is the same thing. So we're approachable, but we're not into making money for our program by doing work that's as focused as will it be a good commercial product. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's along those lines. But we certainly think what we're doing has broad application.
And we interact with people doing commercial products.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Often early in my career, I was just going to say that I made in-kind donation and funding by going to industry and begging them and saying I could do something that they couldn't do. And if they would bankroll me, I would get them there and they could use the information that I got in any way that they wanted to. Now, usually that ended up paying for a project that was too expensive for a graduate student to do. And it always gave them the benefit of not only getting the PR publicly, plus also getting the IP so that they could use that. But often, as you find that, especially in academia, people are programs. So if we have 1,000 courses on our course books, it's not everybody teaches in the same way. So often the intellectual property of an individual person usually goes with the zeitgeist or the whole package, and it's really hard to take that out and export it. So ultimately, I think our product now is our academic product. Our grad students, our pedagogy, the program that they go through, and they produce the culture of innovation, which then follows them wherever they go.
just one second last question, Tony. When you did your thing where, I think it was, what was the instrument, the piccolo, or?
The clarinet?
Clarinet, yeah. When you took the clarinet, the original clarinet sound, and then you divided it between the perceived useful part and the noise.
Yeah.
How do you go about defining what part of the sound coming out of a classical instrument is noise versus perceived value? I.e., doesn't that get into some kind of a subjective, controversial almost discussion where if you're playing the guitar, for example, maybe as your fingers slide through the frets, some might discard that as noise because it's not part of it, but some might say that adds to it.
I think the issue is, I probably wasn't clear. I don't want to discard what is noise. I want to model it in a different way. So if I want to model noise with sinusoids, I will need zillions of sinusoids to add together to be like noise. On the other side, if I have noise and I can model it with 25 critical bands of modulated noise, I can do it and very easily. It's just a matter of separating what and model, it's a matter of finding the right model. And my model strategy is separating what's perceptually relevant. What I mean by perceptually relevant is by things that can be modeled sinusoidally that are relevant. And the rest can be modeled as noise because it's really like background noise.
I mean, if I could just add, this is based on a tradition of research area which has been where the noise component of analyzed sounds have been kludged to sound like noise by having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of oscillators chaotically acting at random frequencies, semi-random frequencies in order to simulate noise, but they're not noise-based. So what Juan is doing is actually trying to do a reality check on the system and say, this history doesn't mean it's the right way.
Yeah, like you can take a symphony orchestra and basically take a snippet of what they're doing and take away all the noise of the, human-bred interactions, foot tappings, whatever, and all that, and actually create, I don't know if you call it the perfect sound, but you create something that wouldn't be able to be achieved.
You could use this technique. The only thing is, the more complex the sound you're putting in, the harder it gets to separate things, especially because the technique that is used is, is just finding peaks or finding like the right places in the analysis, in the spectrum analysis, and it's like finding the mountains of the valleys and just counting them and saying, okay, I see 6 mountains here. Why have 10,000 points of data to just represent 5 mountains? 5 real. That's a little bit. So if you do it with the orchestra, you could certainly do it and separate that part from the noise. But I was about to say, if you do a guitar, like you were saying, like the guitar thing, the peak of the guitar, all those noises could be modeled this way. And we are now working, there's an undergraduate student that is now doing modeling of what is called transient moments in the signal. So it's also modeling what will be modeling the guitar peak, for instance, like all those things, and separate them too. So have layers. Start having layers of this decomposition, and then you can add together to get the original sound, or do crazy things as I was doing in the peak, where you separate them and treat each layer separately, or for doing time dilation. You could put the peaks in the right place if you want the same guitar to play slower, or change scale. Yeah.
Have you done any investigation of rhythmic modeling? This is all on pitch modeling, it seems, mostly. Transients and noise.
No, I haven't worked on rhythmic modeling. Some of our undergraduate students have been doing things like that, like trying to find trying to tap or trying to find where's the pulse of the music by statistical means. But results were not that good. Well, we're good in if you put techno into it, it's like very easy. But if you put jazz, then it's slightly complicated because there's shuffling, there's this string component, and it gets harder and harder. I was trying to do that in another piece that is a piano piece, where there's a section of the piece where you have chords and the player I got to a more or less success of doing it in real time, but then during the performance I didn't do it because sometimes it would fail and it was like, but I have it's with the energy distribution would be very easy to see where you have these transients. We have a model now that can count transients. You give a signal and can give you, okay, there was a transient there was a kick here, and then mark and try to average what the distance between the transients are, and even do it in real time. Yeah.
Especially with respect to the instrumental pieces, to what degree randomness plays a part in, for instance, can the musicians learn the instrument sufficiently to reproduce a particular sound, if they wanted to?
This, in this case of the things that I played, I could make them as random as I want to, or pseudo-random, but these pieces are the same piece. These pieces I played are classical pieces in the sense that they're notated, and the player's learning to play the music, and the computer does the same thing at the same time with the player depending on what they do. So they do need to learn that. So they pretty quickly adapt to at this place in the piece where they do an up bow, that this is going to happen, and they go, this other kind of sound happens. And so they start to and this is because of their training as musicians and their knowledge of their own bodies. Because I'm not making them learn a new instrument, the haptics involved, which is really what we're talking about, the haptic knowledge is so deep that they adapt pretty quickly. Yeah. But you can also create music. You can create systems where I suppose where anybody could make it sound like whatever they wanted it to sound like as well.
Is anyone in the program looking at interactive composition with computers? That is pieces that are partially composed or performed by a computer in real time or anything like that? This is just out of curiosity.
Yeah, we're talking at lunch about this. To really do this and do it as art, right, is a huge intellectual and technical problem that really hasn't been solved by anybody yet. And the reason is because it's very easy to create interactive music. Very hard to create interactive art. Art, in my idea, if it's good art, has to be good all the time. So it can't be randomly good sometimes, and sometimes it's not going to be so good, because I'm going to have someone come in and experience my art, and that time it's bad. If I were the audience, I'd never go back. I'd say, okay, that's bad. I won't do it again. So it's always got to be good. So the interaction means if you've got random people coming and interacting, and they're not masters of the interactive environment, then to me, it's like putting a violin on the table and saying that's an interactive instrument. Anybody who picks it up and plays is doing interactive art. So the questions of how to make it always compelling and always experientially important while having it truly be interactive, that's hard. And I was saying to your colleagues at lunch, that's a problem we'd love to work with people on, because it's not, it's a multi-meta-leveled problem. That many people are doing what they call interactive art, interactive installations. And it's really like games, and I mean not even good games. It's really just a toy at this point and not serious. But there's a serious thing to do there that hasn't been done yet, in my opinion.
Experiment creating tools that we put into the social community aspect to generate art out of it. It sounds like you've done a little bit of that with allowing people to express text messages through funneling messages. But are there additional tools that you're investigating that have more of a social community aspect to them, art expressed that way?
There's a piece that's called Chimera, and in and of itself it's actually cloaked so that people don't know what really we were up to. Ultimately, we're building art forms that have emergent behaviors and allow these properties to be generated with AI software. But I became really suspicious of AI software because we were modeling what people really do. So I built a massive robot as part of the Human Genome Project that was a telerobot that allowed anyone in the world to basically navigate a maze, and wherever you are in the maze, you drop memes in 3 different layers, ATGC, and that would be audio, text, cinema, and graphics. And as you lay in the memes, essentially a robot is a 3-axis machine, right? 3 axes of motion. Well, this is a 2-axis of motion, but we have an infinite z-axis, infinite z data. So ultimately, millions of people went to this, left memes behind, but the memes themselves were tracked by a kind of mathematical minotaur that mutated them. So when you came back to the same space that you thought you were in, the data looked slightly different. So the landscape was always constantly changing. So it really required like a social organism to form, to sequence or code the space. Ultimately, it's like the Human Genome Project, in which it is infinitely complicated. It requires this enormous effort, a community effort, which is actually outside of the Chimera, and then building it inside. We had 5 or 6 of the best computer science programs in the world with bounties on the piece, and it was unable to be solved. And it's not because it doesn't have a solution, it does, but it had to also do with the fact that in the Chimera, a computer understanding context, they don't really know that yet. So reading a GIF or a JPEG which says go up a layer, go back 3 steps, drop down again, you understand what I mean? So it doesn't really register. So ultimately, the interface required people to use cardinal directions, navigate through at any one point, in which most of you, if you have good spatial memory and image recognition, you could learn the map very, very quickly. But because it has 4 layers and they're infinitely deep, you essentially surf this domain of how people map terrain that they've never been in before. So before we start making these ideas and saying, oh, let's think this out and design this, I really wanted to see how people behave in spaces that we've never been before. We have ideas, westward migration, and we can look at history, and we can look at certain ways that people mark stuff out. And even in the Chimera, there were like meta nodes or cities where people did a lot of activity, and then they would use that as a base camp, and they would stake out from their territory and leave scattered memes behind. Other people were very robust. They would build on other people's bodies of knowledge. Entire groups would come in. They would make films about the stories that had been left behind, about the text messages. It got very bizarre. But because I was a creator, I could look in on that. And ultimately, that would be used to write software that would ultimately create these more emergent art forms that have true emergent behaviors, but not based on the modern idea of it, but still running examples. So it's really complicated. And it's a very small space. Only 16,000 points at 4 layers deep, right? And then infinitely. And there's only so much time that you can spend on there, et cetera. But people spend an enormous amount of time. No porno was ever dropped. We were shocked. That's how much viral there. But people kept it fairly sacrosanct. They wanted to try. They wanted to be in a space they'd never been in before. And navigating, which was really amazing, is actually, this would be easy to do as a game. This is a no-brainer. This is like the dumbest thing in the world. But when you are in the museum and you actually sense someone's agency from another place, it's indescribable, because it's absolutely human. You see their telepresence, their teleconsciousness lost and found. They make mistakes. They know they've made mistakes. You watch them back out of it. You watch them look left and right and try to ascertain where they are. And you see all of these models of behaviors. And the great thing about Chimera, it remembers everything and everyone that's ever been there and everything that they've ever done. So you can play it back at 10,000%, you can play it back at 1%. So we would sit and watch and play these models out over and over again, see these meta-level phenomena occur that we can't really see because we live at the speed of light, and it behaves in a different way. So in an hour and a half, it's just impossible to get into really where we are going and what we've done. So that's now something that may have been done.
Here, I think one of the other emergent behaviors that have come out. Is it possible to play some of it? Because the visual.
Keep talking. I got this down on my desktop over here.
Sure.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I don't have a good movie on this one. Yeah, you want to swap out the...
Yeah, probably can swap.
No, it's up here. It's up. This may just be the construction of it. You'll see we're coding it, construction, 8,000 parts, runs multiple languages. Most of the machine code's in G code. Everything's masked with the Flash interface so that you can't go in and hack the URL. You can't really delete the process. We were as rigorous as we possibly could get. I'm trying to get to a point where you'd actually see it moving. It was on one of the sequencing, Secrets of the Sequence. It's a PBS television show.
Do you want to switch monitors? Sound is great.
No, he switched.
Oh, I switched.
Yeah, he switched to the other one.
Oh, this is, yeah.
Switch back. There we go. Click.
I do have lots of video footage, hours of it being constructed, reconstructed, people actively going inside. One of the things that we talked about today is our PhD has 5 instruments in the dissertation, which is probably the most complicated dissertation in the world. And one of those is writing a score, which is basically a way for us to record the motivation and all the other elements behind creating the work. But on top of that, the Chimera is being used as the first iteration example with the UW libraries, which has, these millions of memes, all the email between anyone who is creating it, all of the memory of the robot itself, wherever it went, and then we have library metadata, people poring over that, looking for important pieces of data, and then the things that can be discarded, figuring out how to record it, what's not necessary, what is necessary. So it's a wildly deep piece. And I'll have more video, and I'd be happy to send you a DVD or something like that.
It's just live on the web.
Yeah. Videos is supposed to get, thumbnail-sized films.
So is Chimera still running? Experience still running, or did you?
No, it's part of a touring exhibition, and the exhibition's down, and it goes to other various sites.
We'll have a link to it from our website when it's up again, which maybe a year from now.
I think it's a year, something like a year from now. And then we store everything in a Kickstarter. We don't scrub it and then start it over again. It's completely populated. It was weird, though, when it's kind of tabula rasa.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there, and people really had no idea of where they were or how it really worked. And then you saw these behaviors emerge very quickly about how people would, many of the computer science programs would go in and leave alphanumeric strings so that they could find it, where they were, so that they knew where they were, but they didn't realize that, the Minotaur was as rigorous as it was. It would go in and it would, switch them, change places, multiply them. So you really had to be aware of everything. You had to be kind of omniscient as this core, social organism thinking about the piece. And there were some really, there were people who were very close. It's more of an imaginative solution than a spatial locator. You got to really get your head around it in a much bigger way. And it's more of a conceptual solution. And if somebody was thinking conceptually, it could be solved like that. It's like a riddle.
Did you find, in forming AI in the future, did you find anything out of the pattern recognition and when people were able to orient themselves that could be used in pattern recognition in the future? Like you said, that it took a certain type of conceptualization to find yourself in this space, and that's a problem that you see all the time in computing, is pattern recognition and spatial orientation.
Sure.
Did you find an immersion pattern out of that could be used to write a set of rules that say?
I'd probably extrapolate something like that. But at this point, these are like the proof of concept before we start building more complicated ones. And I probably want to bring my other colleagues in on it, the computer scientists who help build the piece, library people who are on it. Essentially, it's like a book that remembers everyone that's ever been there, everything that it doesn't remember what they read or what they got from it, but they remember every page, how it was turned to, where it was marked, where it was stopped, where it was put back in. It has all of those features to it. And it's just so much data that even the library, this is why they want to embark on this, because it's not just like, we'll have that solved in 2 weeks, and then we'll have an idea for the dissertation. This is like, like an odyssey.
I think it's a great point you bring up, and a good way to sort of explain how we work. We are artists, and I think this is, in a way, your question is proof, because I think you could find very, very useful not only information but techniques embedded in this for things like pattern recognition that maybe Sean is not going to investigate because that wasn't what the work was about. But I think what it shows, in a way, is that art and the creation of art, when you're talking about creating art, that it really does create something of serious challenge to more than just as a cultural challenge, but actually technical challenges. That it opens up windows of possibilities for other fields, and it's in a way we could say it's our proof of the importance of art. That we sometimes ask questions that we don't answer, and they're not only cultural questions or questions about our own, dark psyches, but they may actually be questions about things that go well beyond ourselves, that are important for other people to solve, and they're there for that. So your question is encouraging.
And I'm also evasive, just because sometimes we don't have a tendency to want to go there as a way to highlight that as the prime motivation in the work.
We also have secrets.
Right.
It was commissioned by hardcore scientists and genome scientists, and they liked it because of the science that they could wrap their head around, and potentially could wrap their head around. Maynard Olson and Leroy Hood at UW, the genome scientists. Very, very interesting guys. A large portion of the national and private human genome project. And they were astounded that artists, could come with enough technical knowledge to run, computers in 4 different places, and they're all talking to each other, querying, saying, where am I? Where can I go? And I don't want to show that to anybody. I just use a very simple Flash interface, and then remember all of that stuff. Because it was immediately in their mind, oh my gosh, these are some of the processes that we're using in the human genome. There's the serial process, there's the parallel process, there's the RISC process, there's all of these various methods that they're using. And those are trial and error too. And some paid off and some didn't. We'll use this as backups on some next level, next generation level.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks.